The relationship between House Targaryen and their branch family Baratheon is a turbulent one. So much drama in the Baratheons' 300 years of being around that I had to make a video about it. In the 10 or so generations, sentiments have flipped back and forth between hate and love so many times. Even the founder of House Baratheon, Orys, half-brother to Aegon the Conqueror, had his problematic moments, despite being the closest Baratheon to the Targaryens. He may have been a bastard, but his half-brother Aegon cared deeply for him and treated him like a noble. Orys was Aegon's only close friend. It was an open secret that he was a Targaryen bastard, because you wouldn't want a base-born child getting his hands on a dragon, so their father kept his mouth shut to avoid any potential problems. Orys never got a dragon, and the books never mention where the name Baratheon comes from. But Aegon named his strong brother as the new Lord of the Stormlands after he helped get rid of the old Storm King. Other lords didn't have to question why a base-born 20-year-old rose so high because of his prowess at arms and his fierce loyalty to Aegon and his two sisters. Then after the successful conquest, Orys was made the first Hand of the King. For 4 years, they focused their efforts on Dorne, a war that would change Orys forever. He was captured by a noble in Dorne and held for ransom. After 3 years of negotiating, Aegon happily paid his brother's weight in gold, but the capturers decided to chop off Orys' sword hand. The war against the Dornish entered a different phase after the release of Orys' one hand and the other handless lords, for King Aegon was by that time intent on revenge. The Targaryens unleashed their dragons, burning the defiant castles again and again. Afterward, all accounts say that Lord Orys became crabbed and bitter. Resigning his office as Hand of the King, he turned his attention to Dorne, obsessed with the idea of revenge. The brothers were still cool, but things were different. Even if he was no longer Head of the King, Orys' judgment when asked for some counsel was clouded. All the Targaryen-Baratheon tension comes down to the Baratheons' temperamental ways. Orys' rage and thirst for revenge never faded over the years. It took 30 years for a chance at some vengeance. After Aegon and the Lord of House Will, who cut off Orys' hand, was dead. His chance came during the reign of King Aenys, Aegon's son. An old man by this point, Orys roared forth from Storm's End one last time to smash the Dornish invading his land. When Walter Weil was delivered into his hands, wounded but alive, Lord Orys said, "Your father took my hand. I claim yours as repayment." He hacked off Lord Walter's sword hand, then he took his other hand and both of his feet as well, calling them his usury. Strange to say, Lord Baratheon died on the march back to Storm's End of the wounds he himself had taken during the battle. But his son Davos always said he died content, smiling at the rotting hands and feet dangling in his tent like a string of onions. Orys now dead, King Aenys rewarded the new Lord Davos Baratheon for their family's effort in dealing with the Dornishmen. The Baratheons remained closely connected to House Targaryen and played a significant role in the troubled reigns of Aegon the Conqueror's successors. Davos' brother, Raymond Baratheon, was appointed to Aenys' Kingsguard, the only Baratheon to serve this elite group. He actually managed to save the king's life when some religious extremists came for the Targaryens for their taboo ways. Lord Orys Baratheon's grandson, Lord Rogar, was the first great lord to openly proclaim for Prince Jaehaerys against his uncle Maegor the Cruel. For his loyalty and courage, he was named Protector of the Realm and Hand of the King following Maegor's strange death upon the Iron Throne. During the remainder of King Jaehaerys' minority, Lord Rogar shared the rule of the realm with the king's mother, the Dowager Queen, Alyssa. Half a year later, the two wed. A new Lord Baratheon was directly blood-tied to the Targaryen family once again, this time as a stepfather to King Jaehaerys. Rogar and his brothers were even more unpredictable than Orys, however. They had some extra crazy blood in them. 14-year-old King Jaehaerys refused to put aside his sister wife for another less taboo marriage. This set off his stepfather Rogar and made him go nuclear. Lord Rogar, the Hand of the King, openly wanted to crown another Targaryen, a serious case of treason. In the span of a few days, Rogar went from Jaehaerys' greatest ally to worst enemy. And to think, Rogar once said he would kill Maegor the Cruel for little Jaehaerys. Rogar went on a rant about how everyone around him, including King Jaehaerys, was weak. His new wife, Alyssa of Valerion, in shock, had to do something. It was Queen Alyssa who broke the spell through her tears. "I am the Queen Regent," she reminded them. "Until my son shall come of age, all of you serve at my pleasure, including the Hand of the King." When she turned to her lord husband, Bennifer tells us her eyes looked as hard and dark as obsidian. "Your service no longer pleases me, Lord Rogar. Leave us and return to Storm's End, and we never need to speak again of your treason." But he wasn't done despite being removed from office. When none of the others on the small council wanted to follow his crazy scheme, he called upon his 4 Baratheon brothers to dethrone his stepson. He was a man who knew not how to yield. The taste of defeat was like bile in the back of his throat. In war, he would boast he would never lay down his axe while life remained in his body, and this matter of the king's marriage had become a war to him, and he was determined to win. Rogar's plan was to send different brothers with soldiers behind them to kidnap Targaryen princesses, and crown whichever one he can get his hands on. His younger brother, Orys Baratheon, was captured by the Hightowers and imprisoned for treason. Rogar Baratheon fumed and raged when he learned of his brother's failure and imprisonment, but he did not call his banners as many had feared. Instead, he fell into despair. "I am done," he told his own maester glumly. The Baratheons, in their emotional rages, treat their Targaryen relatives like regular men, when others fear and worship dragon riders. But Rogar finally submitted to Jaehaerys, and he forgave his stepfather after showing him how large his dragon is getting, as a form of intimidation so he never rebels again. Even Oren was only sentenced to 10 years of exile. Rogar returned to being the Targaryens' fearless ally. He had 2 children with Alyssa Velaryon before she died, Bormund and Jocelyn. One of Rogar's 4 brothers was pissed off after being pushed out of the line of Baratheon succession, so joined the Dornish in rebelling against the Targaryens. Rogar led the attack on land to kill his own brother for the king, but Jaehaerys stopped him so he wouldn't become known as a kinslayer. King Jaehaerys killed Orys Baratheon himself, the first time the families took it this far. Bormund and Jocelyn mended all the past drama. They were Jaehaerys' lovable half-siblings. Bormund would have even married a Targaryen princess if she didn't prefer an older man instead of him. Jocelyn did marry Jaehaerys' eldest son, however. That's technically her nephew since Jaehaerys is her brother, but that's just the norm for this family. Jocelyn is the mother of Rhaenys Targaryen. When Rhaenys was passed on to become the heir to the Iron Throne in favor of Viserys, Jocelyn and Lord Bormund were not very happy. But they didn't make a big deal out of it, like some others in their family when their blood boils. I'm surprised they gave Rhaenys the iconic silver Targaryen hair, when she's described as having the Baratheons' thick black hair trait. Helped make it obvious she was Targaryen for the opening House of Dragon scene, where the vote for the next heir takes place, so that's the reason there. But makes the Game of Thrones scene look so dumb when Ned Stark is looking up Baratheon's inherited traits.
Lord Orys Baratheon, black of hair. Axel Baratheon, black of hair. Lionel Baratheon, black of hair. Stefan Baratheon, black of hair. Robert Baratheon, black of hair.
Bormund and his niece Rhaenys were powerful allies for Viserys and Rhaenyra, but Lord Bormund never lived long enough to defend Rhaenyra's claim to the Iron Throne like he certainly would have. His son Borros has none of the redeeming qualities that the other crazy Baratheons have. As violent as short-tempered as they can be, most of them have a fun side and some depth to them. Not Borros. He's a complete asshat of a character. Borros Baratheon was a man of much different character than his father. Lord Bormund was stone, hard and strong and unmoving. Lord Borros was the wind that rages and howls and blows this way and that. Prince Aemond had been uncertain of what sort of welcome he would receive when he set out, but Storm's End welcomed him with feasts and hunts and jousting. Lord Borros proved more than willing to entertain his suit. "I have 4 daughters," he told the prince. "Choose any you like. Cass is oldest, she'll be the first to flower, but Floris is prettier, and if it's a clever wife you want, there's Maris." Rhaenyra had taken House Baratheon for granted for too long, his lordship told Aemond. "Aye, Princess Rhaenys is kin to me and mine. Some aunt I never knew was married to her father. But the both of them are dead, and Rhaenyra, she's not Rhaenys, is she?" Borros defied his father's wishes to protect Rhaenyra's claim and join Aegon II's usurping cause. All just for one of his daughters to be with Aemond, who's pretty far down the line of succession. Rhaenyra taking him for granted just because their blood ties are closer seems to be the real reason. He was a simple savage, and the books describe him as belligerent and illiterate.
"Where's the bloody maester?"
"Go home, pup, and tell the bitch your mother that the Lord of Storm's End is not a dog she can whistle up and need to set against her foes," is what he tells little Luke in the books. There's one more important detail House of Dragon omitted from the lore. Aemond almost let Lucerys fly home without a fight, but for the girl Maris, the second-born daughter of Lord Borros, less calmly than her sisters, she was angry with Aemond for preferring them to her. "Was it one of your eyes he took, or one of your balls?" Maris asked the prince in tones sweet as honey. "I am so glad you chose my sister. I want a husband with all his parts." Aemond Targaryen's mouth twisted in rage, and he turned once more to Lord Borros, asking for his leave. The Lord of Storm's End shrugged and answered, "It's not for me to tell you what to do when you are not beneath my roof." Maris, the next generation of Baratheon, was also a crazy who couldn't control her emotions. Instead of using her fists, she used her tongue. After Maris and her sibling generation, there's a gap in Baratheon lore that's left unexplored by George Martin. I would guess there's 2 unnamed Lord Baratheons, because the next notable one didn't come around until 200 AC, 70 years after Lucerys was killed outside of Storm's End. Enter the Laughing Storm, one of my favorite Baratheons, mainly because of his cool epithet. Lionel the Laughing Storm is a major character in the first Dunk and Egg short story, where he's one of the participants in a big tourney. He was a crowd favorite with the way he broke into loud laughter the moment an opponent would strike him. He would break off other tourney fighters' crests and toss them into the crowd. See, Baratheons can be fun. He defended Duncan the Tall in a 7 vs 7 trial by combat, just because of how rare these kind of things are, and he wanted to be involved. But he was going up against some Targaryens in the trial of 7, which could have hurt his relationship with the royals, but he didn't care, as long as he was a part of the big event. It seems like he kept up good relations with Dunk and Egg after the short story, because when Egg did become king years later, as Aegon V, he promised that his heir would marry Lionel's daughter and become queen one day. Well, Egg's son decided to marry a common girl instead out of love, angering the Laughing Storm. Egg's heir decided to walk away from his birthright and let one of his brothers be heir so that he could be with a common wife. Even that could not restore the peace, nor win back the friendship of Storm's End, however. Lord Lionel Baratheon, famed for his prowess in battle, was not a man easily appeased when his pride was wounded. A short, bloody rebellion ensued, ending only when Sir Duncan of the Kingsguard defeated Lord Lionel in single combat, and King Aegon gave his solemn word that his youngest daughter, Rhaelle, would wed Lionel's heir. To seal the bargain, Princess Rhaelle was sent to Storm's End to serve as Lord Lionel's cupbearer and companion to his wife. The families were friends again, with Rhaelle Targaryen marrying Ormond Baratheon, the next Lord of Storm's End. While Lionel was a little too temperamental to serve court, his son Ormond would become Hand of the King one day, so he must have been one of the few sensible Baratheons. He had died leading the Targaryen army against the royal family's biggest threat, House Blackfyre, who themselves, like House Baratheon, are a branch family founded by a Targaryen bastard. Ormond was one of the first to be killed, struck down by Meleys the monstrous Blackfyre, and died in the arms of his son and heir, Steffon. Lord Steffon is Robert, Stannis, and Renly's father. We made it all the way down to familiar territory. The half-Baratheon, half-Targaryen Steffon was sent to King's Landing as a child to serve as a squire for the royals, and to grow up with his first cousin, Aerys, aka the Mad King. Steffon and Aerys were best pals before madness struck. Right after Renly was born, the Mad King requested Steffon join his small council. Paranoia controlled the Mad King's life, and he felt he could only trust his old friend and cousin Steffon. We don't know much about Steffon's character or what responsibilities he had on the small council, but we do know that the Mad King tasked him with finding a wife for Rhaegar in Essos with Valyrian blood still running in their veins. The dragon blood was running dry in Westeros, so they had to look elsewhere. Steffon and his wife died in a storm on the trip back home, right outside their castle. The Baratheon kids held no ill will towards the Mad King for arranging this dumb trip. Though a few years later, Robert would develop a deep hatred for Rhaegar that would consume his life, similar to his ancestor Orys. Robert was betrothed to Lyanna Stark. She wasn't all that enthusiastic about the future marriage, because Robert already had a bastard, and she didn't believe he could control his lusts. A smart lady. But Robert believed he was madly in love, barely knowing Lyanna, I should add. In one of the biggest tourneys ever in the story, Rhaegar managed to win the joust and decided to name Lyanna his Queen of Love and Beauty over his own wife. Robert laughed it off in public, saying he was only paying her due, while Brandon Stark, heir to Winterfell, had to be restrained as he saw it as an insult to his little sister. Ned, who knew Robert Baratheon best, saw behind his smiles. A special kind of hate towards Rhaegar was born that day. A year later, Lyanna disappeared with Rhaegar. The Mad King handled the situation horribly. He executed Lord Rickard Stark and Brandon, then going as far as ordering the heads of Robert and Ned. Robert's rebellion kicked off, and after fighting for a year, Robert finally got to face Rhaegar on the battlefield. No one could have saved him that day in the Riverlands, where Robert, wielding his warhammer, became known as the Demon of the Trident. In my dreams, I kill him every night, Robert admitted. 1,000 deaths will still be less than he deserves. Even with his cousin Rhaegar and the Mad King dead for 15 years, Robert's vengeance wasn't quenched. He says he'll kill every Targaryen he gets his hands on. He's as Baratheon as it gets, while Stannis and Renly couldn't be more different than their loud, drunk, and angry older brother. Robert has some bastards that could come across some of the last Targaryens in the next books, but Stannis' daughter Shireen is the only Baratheon part of this last generation, and she has none of these crazy traits. Everyone mentions how many Targaryens have been mad either due to incest or insane trauma. It's the Baratheons with the crazy gene though.